Well, we've had more than enough baseball conversation between you and I, Dave. We got to bring in another expert to just talk us off the ledge, tell us why things are going to be all okay out here in Seattle. Now joining us on the Emerald Queen Casino Sportsbook Hotline is a man who's been through it. He's played at that level. You see him on ESPN. You see him on MLB Network. You can hear him on MLB Network Radio with his show, The Leadoff Spot. He is the one, the only Xavier Scuggs with us. How are you, man?
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me today. I'm good. I'm doing well.
Well, we appreciate you doing it, and let's talk about what's going on with this this Mariner team. And I don't know how much you've had a chance to truly focus in on them as a team beyond the story of Cal Raleigh and the home runs, but the wheels feel like they're coming off a bit, especially when this team hits the road, and we're all waiting for another playoff berth, the second one since 2001. What do you see from your eye when you watch this team and you watch how they perform at home versus who they seem to be on the road, which is not good?
Yeah, to me, it just seems like, and I'm very familiar with the Mariners season, being someone that covers all teams, I try to stay locked in as much as possible, especially when a team comes to my city. And I live in Tampa, and obviously the last two games have been against the Rays. I've gotten a chance to go out there to Steinbrenner Field and check them out. The one thing I see with the Mariners is the offense almost at times gets a little bit slow going at the beginning of the game. We know that the offense has been good, pretty consistent all season long, which has been a great thing because we haven't seen that in a few years. But offensively, I think they can help out the starting pitchers a little bit more, which have seemed to be a little bit more the issue is if they get going a little bit earlier in the game. Yesterday, they didn't score 3 until the 4th inning, and Tampa jumped out early in a couple of runs. And the same thing, going back to Monday as well. So offensively, if they can get a jump started a little bit sooner, I think that helps out the rest of the pitching staff as well.
Well, Xavier, what do you make of the Mariners pitching right now? It sounds like they early on they certainly could use some offensive support there, but man, this is a team, they were number one in several categories last year, and you basically have the same guys. Do you think that they can turn it around because they showed that they could do it last year for sure?
Absolutely. I think it's such a long season, and obviously expectations were extremely high when you think about how well they've pitched as an organization, especially the young guys that they've brought up in their depth organization as well. But to me, when you have, Brian Wu at the top of this rotation alongside George Kirby and Logan Gilbert, I think what it tells you, as well as Bryce Miller, it tells you that the experience is there. And yes, they may have taken a small step back, but I think that if this team gets going down the stretch, and that could ultimately mean the last 2 weeks of the season, right? But as long as they're going as well as they can down the stretch, I think ultimately they'll propel themselves into the postseason. And yes, Luis Castillo is going to have to be a better version of himself too, because when we talk about experience, this is one guy that's a big part of the veteran leadership there. And he's got to be a better version, at least using more both sides of the plate with that changeup and being a little bit more swing and miss capable. But yeah, this is a team that I think we can turn it around very quickly.
When you see a team struggling like this, Xavier, who do everybody wants to point the fingers. It's this guy's fault, it's that guy's fault, and very often it gets pointed at the manager. How much as a guy that's been in that clubhouse before, when a team's going like this, do you look at that and say it's up to the manager to get these guys turned around, pointed in the right direction, or is it all on the players? How do you view it when it's a struggle like this?
No, I think everybody kind of takes blame, specifically in the clubhouse. You kind of lean, as a former player, you lean more towards the hitting coaches and pitching coaches, towards kind of what the scouting reports look like, right? That's going to be a huge focus in this last month of the season going into October is how refined are we with our scouting reports? How well are we at executing those scouting reports as well? And how prepared are we? That's going to be the big thing for these players because, when guys take a step back, it's the one thing you can lean on is how prepared are we going into battle? And that's going to be a focus for, both the pitching and the offensive side. And once again, I have so much confidence going into September with this team just because we've seen them make adjustments, especially from the offensive side. And I think that's one thing that you can lean on finishing out the rest of the season.
Xavier, they got a couple of guys that everybody wanted at the trade deadline, plus, some help in the bullpen with Ferguson. But everybody wanted Suarez and
Right.
Naylor, and could they have done anything more? I mean, where did you rank their trade deadline moves?
Man, I thought they did an excellent job. You got two of the better hitters that were going to be available at the trade deadline. Obviously, adding to the bullpen is important as well. I thought I give them an A+. You think about how expensive guys are when it comes to trade deadline time. And, Jerry Dipoto was able to go out there and be aggressive. And a lot of teams ended up with nothing or short of nothing. And I just think offensively they took a step forward. And I know Suarez has not been the same power hitter that you've expected him to be since coming over from the D-backs. But I still think that lengthens out your lineup in a major way to now where Naylor's getting pitched to differently, right? And he's been successful. The same thing goes for Cal Raleigh. I think Randy Arozarena helps him as much as anybody else as well. It just deepens your lineup, and that's what we've seen them do. And offensively, from a power standpoint, that's how you win playoff games. You need power, and if this team gets to the postseason, which they're in a position to do so, power will be a big part of their game.
Xavier, I'll give you the other side of that because I'm somebody that on social media was like, hey, they killed it at the trade deadline. They went now it's on the players and the coaches because they gave you the tools, and the immediate blowback, especially now when they're struggling, is, well, this is on ownership because they should have been doing this in the offseason and not waiting until all these games are in the bank and you're either up or down by a few games. They need to do this in the beginning of the season, which I think is fair, especially when it comes to this organization. But what do you think about that, I guess, sort of counter argument to, hey, they killed it at the trade deadline?
Right. No, I think it's fair, but I also look at, notoriously they haven't really spent that type of money in the off season, right? And they haven't really looked to go out too far on a limb and definitely not use the starting pitching to do so, which I understand too, because it's hard to develop starting pitching, and that's exactly what they've done for over the past few years. I think when you look at kind of the timing of it, you also, as a president of operations, want to look and make sure that your team is in a position to go after some of those great players, and who might be available via trade deadline. So I think a lot more planning goes into it than people realize in the off season. A lot of guys are like, okay, let's look at what this trade deadline could look like in 2025 and even next year into 2026. Do we need to spend the money, or do we need to make the moves right now in the off season when those moves might still be available right when we hit the deadline?
Xavier, just weigh in a little bit on Cal Raleigh and what he's done, and had kind of a discouraging tweet overnight. He said, you don't want to be in that situation again for 3 years in a row, and there's no sugarcoating it, and it would be terrible, a terrible way to go out. But yeah, I mean, he's been kind of vocal about that. But anyway, yeah, just your reaction to that. It was just kind of negative from Cal, which he's usually, I mean, he's a great leader, and we know that, but just, what he means to that team, and then also, what he's done this year.
Yeah, I think there's obviously a bit of taste in his mouth, as I'm sure there are some other guys as well. And I also think if he's looking at it, and I think it's natural to kind of look at it individually too, right? He's had such a historic season. It would almost feel like it almost went to waste if your team doesn't do what they're capable of doing, right? And you don't lead your team to a playoff opportunity. I think that's part of it. And I think we also have to commend him for putting his thoughts out there, because a lot of times you don't really hear the truth from players. And most of this season, if you think about it, Cal has been pretty reserved as far as his historic season goes. So I think it's really of what he wants to see this team do and what we all know they're capable of doing, especially after such an amazing season. And just to touch on what he's done this year, I love the adjustments specifically from the right-handed side, right? Like last year was not that good. I think he hit the fastball at like a 150 clip on the right-handed side. The confidence that he has now on that side has even, I think, fed off into the left-handed side, and he's so unbeatable almost on both sides at this point.
How do you size up that MVP race? I know there's still a month of baseball to go, but you look at Judge's numbers versus his, and they each have their categories they dominate. But we're out here going, look, voters need to take into account he's playing a premium position and the most physically demanding position in baseball, and you've got Judge who's DHing and sometimes in the outfield has been hurt. So I don't know. Does that even it out in your mind, or do you feel like this is Judge's MVP to lose? How do you size up that matchup?
I feel like that does even it out in a sense. And, when we look at kind of historic numbers, right, and the first time we've seen a catcher do something like this, I think we have to take that into consideration. I think voters will. I think voters will also take into consideration, like, the new shiny toy as well, right? Like, that's always becomes a part of it, too. But I also think about, this is a player that has the opportunity to take his team to the postseason, right? So I think this month is just as important for Judge as it is for Cal Raleigh, right? Like, the production that he has this month, will it ultimately lead his team to a playoff spot? And if it doesn't, that may end up hurting him. But I also think you have to look at, what he's done from catching most of the games, right? Being the primary catcher. And I also think about, from a player's perspective, taking on the toll of your body and having the worst travel in all of Major League Baseball as well, playing for the Mariners. Those things factor into it to me. And I think he's doing probably the most special thing we've seen in quite some time.
Xavier, where do you rank as far as, the dangerous teams? I mean, the Mariners are obviously in that third wild card spot, but right now it looks like the Rangers are a game and a half back from that spot. Kansas City, right. Tampa Bay. Who are the dangerous American League teams for the Mariners?
I think I think that mostly Texas and Kansas City. Obviously the Rays have played better baseball, but I think it might still be a little tough for them to jump 3 teams to get to the postseason. I think with the good thing, and I think Mariners fans should keep this in mind, is that, Rangers have recently suffered a lot of injuries. Corey Seager just recently, appendix, just having an issue with that. Will have surgery with that. Some of their best players unavailable at this moment. Evaldi, same thing. So I think, just noticing that how much other teams are beat up. Kansas City, they have struggled, scoring runs a lot of the times. Not a lot of power in their lineup. Going to be tough ball games down the stretch for them, as they've lost their last 2 games as well. So just as tough as it's been on the Mariners, I think it'll be just as tough for a Texas team that's trying to catch them, a Kansas City team that's trying to catch them, and the Rays as well. So when I look at the rest of the league, and I look at Toronto, I look at Detroit, and I look at Houston, when the Mariners are playing their best baseball, I think they're capable of beating all 3 of those teams as well.
Xavier, last one before we let you go. We hear about, establishing a winning culture, that you got to do that. And this is a team that, as I said, they've made the playoffs one time since 2001. One time. They've never been to a World Series. They got to the postseason in 2022. So, yeah, they've had winning seasons, but it hasn't resulted in a playoff appearance other than that one time. So in your mind, with that history, how hard is it to establish that winning culture? And is that on the manager? Is that on ownership? How do you see that? Is that a real thing?
Yeah, I think it is. I played for the St. Louis Cardinals, and there was always kind of that expectation of that winning culture, right? Like, it was unacceptable to not almost to not win a series, right? And then I went over and played for the Marlins, and it was almost the exact opposite. It was almost too loose, and you're just hoping to win instead of expecting to win. And I think the same, can be said for any team, including the Mariners, right? I think it's kind of changing the perspective and not so much, thinking about the years that we've lost so much and how we haven't been able to get to where we want to be. But no, we are that team now. We've been able to show some consistency. We've brought some different players in that can do some special things. I think of Randy Arozarena in his postseason experience. I think of, the J-Rod show. How much of a show can he put on during the postseason? I think about Cal Raleigh and the adjustments he's made. All of those things to me show that there's ability to change the outlook of that culture. And I think Dan Wilson has been a huge part of that. The same thing for Edgar Martinez. I think that type of culture has been brought in, and we'll only find out here in a few weeks if it ultimately pushes them over the edge.
He is a former big leaguer. Now you can catch him on ESPN and MLB Network. Also listen to his show, The Leadoff Spot, on MLB Network Radio. Xavier Scuggs has been our guest here with Wyman and Bob. Xavier, great to talk to you, man. Really appreciate you taking time with us, and hopefully we get a chance to talk again.
Yes, sir. Thank you guys for having me. Have a good one.